Roy really doesn't need an introduction of much. We know him by his work with the SOAW, and he's been here several times as a guest and has made friends here through those visits, as well as a number of people here that have been down to Georgia at Fort Benning. But as we talk about a contemplation, inward journey, you know, a lot of Roy's time of contemplation was done in a monastic cell in penitentiary prisons for his witness for civil disobedience to close the School of Americas and other actions. But also personal prayer and contemplation leads him to put his faith into action. And that's why where he's now, and he'll share that journey, what he's doing now, why it's so important, and what it means for all of us. And as we begin, I just was reading here, I have a book I use each day. It's called Peacemaking, Day by Day. It's by Pax Christi. And I was kind of reading this today, and I was laughing, the thought for today for peacemaking. And when I read it, I thought immediately of Roy and our gathering here tonight, and I think it's something that we're very familiar with. This quote, "All truth passes through three stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as being self-evident." And I think you can figure out where we're at with that three-tiered process. I'm not sure if we're at 1 or 2, but we're not at 3. We know that.
Thank you. First, it's such a joy and honor to be with you. It's a little cooler here, a little chillier than Georgia, I must say. But special thanks to Sue Davis and the warm hospitality of the faith community, the Methodists, and all of you who are here this evening to be a part of this big discussion that's going on, not only in the Catholic Church, but tonight we're going to kind of focus in on that issue in the Catholic Church, but this is a discussion that's taking place in society, in the workplace, and around the world, this issue of gender equality. And many are asking in the Catholic Church if men and women are indeed created of equal worth and dignity. Why is the church teaching say simply that only males can be ordained? We're going to address that. Years ago when I graduated from the university in Louisiana, it was during the days of Vietnam, being a patriotic young man. I joined the military thinking of making it a career. In my 4th year, I volunteered for shore duty in Vietnam, believing our leaders who said our cause was noble. We were going to be the liberators. And so many of us went to Vietnam buying into that great lie. And so many of us were changed by that experience. The violence, the suffering, the death, losing friends there. And in the madness of war, my faith became stronger. Death was close and my God became close. And I felt God calling me to be a priest. I grew up in a traditional Catholic family in Louisiana, but whenever I saw a priest, I would turn around and go the other way. And so I didn't know what to do with that call I was feeling. Talked to an army chaplain, and he helped me get into the Marino order, a missionary community working in 25 countries around the world with the poor. Being male, I was accepted into the priesthood and to the seminary. And in 1972, I was ordained and found that meaning, that hope, that joy that I was seeking in life, that we are all seeking in life. I was assigned as a young priest to our mission work in Bolivia. where this slum on the outskirts of La Paz became my home for the next 5 years. And it was here where the poor, they really became my teachers. They really introduced to me their struggle for justice and really food for the table. So many of the people there, the majority, living in the shacks without running water. So many of their children not having the medicines they needed to be healed, didn't make it beyond the age of 4 or 5. And there was our country, the United States, supporting a brutal dictatorship, General Bonzer, and the men with the guns, who were exploiting the cheap labor there and those vast natural resources. The poor introduced to me that all-important word, solidarity, solidaridad, which simply means to walk with others, to accompany others in their struggle, to make the struggle of others your struggle. And it was in Bolivia I was introduced to a new theology, a theology called the theology of liberation, that gives hope to people, especially the poor, that teaches about an all-loving God who does not want anyone to suffer, does not want anyone to live in a shack where there's not enough food for the table for their children, where there are not schools for their kids. No. This theology teaches about a God who gave every country enough resources for everyone to live comfortably and in peace, where there will not be oppression, discrimination, and hunger. And in this theology, they know that everyone is called to the table as equals, where no one at that table can say they are superior or better than the other, or somehow more worthy to do something. No. We are created, everyone, of equal worth and dignity. The repression in Bolivia intensified. Many were killed. Many imprisoned. In my 5th year, I was among the many arrested, and I was forced out of the country. It was a hard time, a lonely time. I could not go back to my mission, to the people that taught me so much and who I grew to love, who became my family outside of Louisiana. Many became very involved now in the School of the Americas issue. After Bishop Oscar Romero was assassinated in El Salvador, after 4 churchwomen from our country, 2 of them Marino sisters, good friends of so many of us, Sister Maura Clark and Ida Ford, and with them were the Ursuline Sister Jean Donovan, and lay missioner Jean Donovan, and Sister, help me out here, Dorothy Kazel, when she, of the Ursuline community with the 4 women, raped and killed by the military. And then when 6 Jesuit priests, a young mother, their co-worker, and her teenage daughter, Selena, were dragged out of their rooms at the university, the Jesuit university in El Salvador, and were massacred. And when a congressional task force went to El Salvador to investigate, when they returned reporting that those responsible for this massacre were trained at the U.S. Army School of the Americas at Fort Benning, Georgia, that's when I and a small group went there to start up the School of the Americas Watch. And when the United Nations Truth Commission report announced that those who killed Bishop Romero, those who raped and killed the churchwomen, and the Jesuits and the young mother and her daughter and so many others were trained at this School of the Americas at Fort Benning, Georgia, our movement, I must say, blossomed. Over 50,000 soldiers, we learned, had trained here over the years. They came here to learn combat skills, counterinsurgency. We learned that the insurgents were always the poor, the faith leaders like Bishop Romero, the church women, the Jesuits, and others. They were the labor leaders, especially in Colombia. Human rights activists, healthcare workers. They were the targets of those who trained at this School of the Americas. We put the word out. Let us gather at the main gate of Fort Benning every November, that weekend before Thanksgiving, to show our love and solidarity with our sisters and brothers of these countries, 15 countries who have their soldiers here. Let us call for the closing of this school, a school that was causing untold suffering and death to so many of these countries. And our movement, I must say, went from 10 to 100 to 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, 20,000. And it was such a joy to see as we gathered there so many students, high school students, college students, the women religious, the nuns who came into our movement at the very beginning. Parents came with their children. And what a wonderful way to teach our children about peacemaking, about that all-important word, solidarity. A lot of veterans came, the Grandmothers for Peace. We had speakers, musicians. At night we had, at the convention center, a lot of workshops, teach-ins, dealing not only with the School of the Americas, but other injustices, racism, sexism, homophobia, and that all-important issue, the drones. I must say, in this area, as you know better than I, there is that air base that is causing a lot of suffering and death. The name of the base? Hancock, right outside of Syracuse, where the drones are located, where there's a lot of intensive, sophisticated teaching about the drones, and how in this state and in that area, in this area, there is a movement that's being, like the School of the Americas Watch, that's growing. And that is a movement in your in the backyard here that needs attention. Drone warfare. How these drones are being used in Pakistan and Afghanistan and other countries and are killing many, many civilians, including many children and their parents and grandparents. And we should know about this. I'm happy to report 6 countries, due to our delegations to these countries and meeting with their presidents, 6 countries have withdrawn from the school. Argentina, Uruguay, Venezuela, Bolivia. It was such a joy to go back to Bolivia and to meet with the president, Evo Morales, and have him say to us, Bolivia will no longer be sending their troops here. And then just this past year, we met with the presidents of Ecuador, Rafael Correa and President Daniel Ortega of Nicaragua, and they too made a decision to pull out. And next month we'll be going to El Salvador, hopefully to meet with the president there, requesting once again that they pull out. We're not going away. We're keeping our hands on the plow. Thousands will gather in November once again at the main gate of Fort Benning. I know some of you have been with us down in Georgia at the main gate. Could you please raise your hand? All right, yes. Whenever we gather there, that Sunday is very solemn, as you know. We call out the names. We carry thousands of those white crosses bearing the names of the victims and the children, their ages. Call out their names, and by the thousands in unison, we say, presente. This person is with us. We are touching on the sacred here when we call out their name, followed by presente. Many weep. And when we get to the fence, we turn it into this memorial wall. We place those crosses on that chain link fence. And some always feel compelled to go over that fence or around it. And over the years, over 350 of our people have done that and have been arrested and have gone off to prison for 6 months. And whenever they send us to prison, our movement is energized. More come into the movement. The truth can never be silenced. They can jail the resistors, but they cannot jail the truth. For more information on the School of the Americas, just go to our website, soaw.org. In April, we're going to be in Washington, knocking on those congressional doors, reminding our members of Congress that we do not want them to be spending our hard-earned tax money, millions of dollars going into this military school, training all of these soldiers from Latin America, every dollar coming from our pocket, when there are budgets being cut to our schools here at home, here in New York and wherever I travel. This is a scandal. This is really a theft from the poor of our communities. Over the last 22 years in working on this School of the Americas issue and addressing this injustice in Latin America, I discovered an injustice much closer to home in my church as a Catholic priest. I began to meet many devout Catholic women who shared with me and told me of their call to the priesthood. And what I heard reminded me of my experience years ago in Vietnam, that call by the divine, that call by God. And because I was a man, a male, I was able to become a priest because the church teaches men can be ordained, only men. And I began to question that teaching. Why wouldn't women be ordained? Don't we profess that we are created equal? All priests say that the call to be a priest is a gift and comes from God. And the question I asked myself and my fellow priest was a simple one. Who are we as men to say that our call is authentic, but your call as women is not? And what I saw here was a grave injustice. Years ago, I had learned something very important, as many of you have. When there is an injustice, our silence is the voice of complicity. And I had to break my silence to sleep at night. And wherever I spoke on the School of the Americas issue, audiences got the package deal. They also heard about this injustice of the exclusion of women to the priesthood. Pulling a little Rubio here.
Take your time, take your time.
And the more, I must say, as an activist, and so many of us are activists, as parents, people in the workplace. We know how important meditation is, to be quiet, to withdraw into solitude. I've become a great lover of solitude, especially when there's a struggle going on. And time in prison, I must say those 4 years in prison at different times helped. Some of the best retreats I have had were in prison, where you are able, when you are still and quiet and in solitude, see with clarity these issues of injustice, and more important, what you must do in relation to that injustice, and to muster up the courage that you will need to confront it, knowing that if we confront injustices, there will be consequences, some little ones and some real big ones. We've all experienced that. And what I saw very clearly in my church's teaching was that sin of sexism. It brought back memories of growing up in Louisiana, going to segregated schools for 12 years in that little town, and worshiping in the Catholic Church, where the last 5 pews in our church were for our black members. And no one said, we have a problem here. What I do remember are the mantras. It is our tradition, this issue of segregation. We are separate but equal, we said. And what our church leaders are saying about women not being ordained, it is our tradition. Yes, men and women are equal, but they have different roles. Sexism, like racism, like homophobia, and all these other forms of discrimination against others. It's a sin. It's wrong. It's immoral. And no matter how hard we may try to justify discrimination against others because of their race, their gender, their sexual orientation, in the end, it is never the way of God. And in this case of excluding women to the priesthood in the Catholic Church, it is the way of men, little men with little faith and little hearts, who have created God in their image, and their God is very male. Their God that they worship somehow sees women as lesser than men. And this must stop. This must stop. Sort of a turning point for me came when I went to Rome to speak at a conference about Latin America in the School of the Americas. And the message was well received by a large group of sisters and priests. And then the last day there, I was invited on Vatican Radio for an interview for 15 minutes to speak about the School of the Americas. And I had 2 more minutes to go, and I just put it out there. There will be no justice in the Catholic Church until women can be ordained. And I talked about how women are also being called to the priesthood. And I had another minute to go, but the manager came in and cut me off. The Gregorian chant, that solemn music came in. I slept well that night. I came back, continued my ministry, and then after attending the ordination of Janice Severodzinski in Lexington, Kentucky. That was 4 years ago. Just a couple months later, I received, I must say it was a wonderful, joyful celebration. Hundreds came together to support this woman being called to the priesthood, to say that she wanted to serve our church for the rest of her life. Wow. She said yes to that call from God. And she, like so many of these women, are said, you've waited for 2,000 years. And we have been patient enough. And we will be ordained. And we will follow our call from God, no matter the consequences. Two months later, I received that letter from the Vatican, very serious letter, giving me 30 days to recant my support for the ordination of women, or I would be excommunicated. The letter also said that I was causing grave scandal in the church by supporting the ordination of women. I went on retreat. I needed a week of solitude and prayer and reflection to write my response. And I wrote back, really focusing in on the conscience, the issue of conscience. As we know, that's very sacred. Our lifeline to God, our conscience. Always urging us to do what is right, to do what is just. And when we follow our conscience, wow, we sleep well at night. There's that joy in our heart, that peace. And when we don't follow our conscience, we're torn, we're tormented. And I simply said in my letter, what you're asking me, I cannot do. It would be a betrayal of my conscience, a lie to you, to say that I do not believe God calls both men and women to the priesthood. This I cannot do. And I also addressed the issue of scandal in closing. And I said, you know, when Catholics hear the word scandal, they think of the 5,000 priests in the United States alone who sexually abused over 12,000 children, and how so many bishops and cardinals, knowing of these horrific crimes, said nothing or covered up their crimes. I didn't get a response back from the Vatican. I went about my ministry, speaking in so many churches and colleges about the School of the Americas and women's ordination. And then on November the 19th, just a couple months ago, I got a call from the Maryknoll headquarters in Ossining, New York. It was a serious call. I was informed that the Vatican had expelled me from the priesthood and from my Maryknoll community. And I was numb. I was sort of in shock. And then that shock and numbness became very painful and hurt. We've all experienced pain and hurt, rejection at times. No one of us here tonight is a stranger to that. I needed solitude. I just left my apartment and needed to be alone. It was a sleepless night. And the next day I had to respond. And I simply notified Maryknoll and the Vatican, yes, it is very painful to be dismissed from the priesthood where I found so much joy and meaning in my life. And more hurtful, really, to be kicked out of the Maryknoll community where I've been a member for 46 years. But I did say this, you can dismiss me from the community and from the priesthood, but you can never dismiss, you will not dismiss this issue of gender equality. This will not go away. The majority of Catholics, well over 68%, the polls are showing, support the ordination of women. I've been doing a lot of thinking over the last couple of months, and what I realize is what I'm going through. That's challenging, but is but a glimpse of the suffering that women in the Catholic Church and society have endured for centuries. What I'm experiencing as a Catholic priest, as a man, is but a fraction of the suffering that so many in our world and in our church experience because of being on the receiving end of discrimination. And this has got to stop. As they say in Latin America, the poor said in the barrio, as they suffered day in and day out, basta, enough. We are going to change this. I have to tell you, in the midst of the hurt, I'm filled with a lot of hope. A lot of hope. I felt that hope last night in Albany when 400 came to the talk. I feel that hope as we have such a nice group of folks here tonight. And I'm sure I'm going to feel that hope wherever I go. And I've been doing a lot of reflecting. There were many who tried to stop the abolition of slavery, including many in our church. They failed. There were many who tried to stop the right of women to vote, the women's suffrage movement. Oh, they caused a lot of problems, a lot of suffering, but they failed. There were many who tried to stop the civil rights movement, especially in the South, and they too failed. And they also will fail in this movement of gender equality, because it's rooted in justice, it's rooted in dignity, it's rooted in equality, and most of all, it is rooted in God, and that is unstoppable. In closing, I just want to say my only regret that I have as a Catholic priest is that it took me so long to break my silence and address this issue of male domination in the Catholic Church. Thank you. Thank you very much. I really want to now welcome your comments, questions that you might have. For those who have to leave, I hope you can stay, but don't leave without checking out the resource table in the back. There's the documentary you just saw, Pink Smoke. It's available in the back, and it's one way we can help build this movement of gender equality. Get a copy and share it with your friends. Give a copy to your local priest as a gift. Or to the local bishop. And it makes a great birthday present. Also in the back is the booklet, My Journey from Silence to Solidarity. Please take one of these also for you and a gift for someone else. Okay, your questions or comments, please. I've spoken about the struggle for gender equality and the ordination of women here in this country. What about internationally? I must say, it's here, also internationally, I also see a lot of hope, especially in countries like Australia and Austria. And the church, as we know, in Ireland is going through a real crisis, a real crisis. Less than 10% of Catholics even attend Mass. The church for many here at home has become very irrelevant, especially among our youth. I meet so many Catholics in my many travels who raise their children Catholic, and who today, their kids, they say to me, not one of them, they might have 5, 6, 7 children, I hear this so often, no longer want to be a part of the church because of its policies on women and the whole issue of sexual orientation, being gay in our church and society, the discrimination there. There is resistance, however, here and everywhere, because there are men, I must say, and to be very honest, what saddened me was to see the depth of sexism in the church. I did not realize among so many priest friends how so many would see women as a threat to our power. We have lost our way. We belong to a very privileged and very powerful clerical culture. For 2,000 years, somehow we got away from the teachings of Jesus, and this issue of power became more and more important. Somehow, our Pope, our bishops and priests have become more important than this man Jesus and his teachings, which was all about humility and serving others, helping people who are vulnerable, who are made to suffer because of violence, oppression, and discrimination. We have lost our way. I do not believe that change will come from the very powerful. It didn't happen in Latin America, and it's not going to happen in our church where there's so much power. And those with the power, the clerical culture, that old boys club as we call it, are not going to simply give up their power and say to women, welcome. Even if that means being overworked. Today there's a real shortage of priests wherever I go. In New Orleans, last year over 30 churches closed. Cleveland over 50. I know if I were still a priest and I had like 2 or 3 parishes and didn't have time to take a little break and go fishing or out, just out in the woods, I would welcome, I would say, give me not 1 priest, but send me 2 or 3 women priests. But that day is coming. We have a real shortage that's moving into a crisis here. And that day will come. But what's important, I think, wherever we are in any country, I think is to try and speak, to come into the discussion as we are doing this evening. What many of us are acknowledging today is in the conversation that's going on. And I must say, too, what was most offensive, to be called in to the Marino headquarters, to be told that I as a priest, or you as Catholics, could not even discuss what we're talking about this evening. That somehow I was told that really Pope John Paul II, in his papal document in 1994, simply declared, there will be no more discussion about women's ordination. Oh, really? When I was told, because I went to the headquarters in New York before the general council, I felt like, being called to the principal's office. But there, I remember being told that, and I laughed. And I said, the last time I was told I couldn't talk about something and go to my room, I was like 5 years old. And the thing is, as I said to my Marino brothers, you know, this discussion will go on with us or without us. And it's so important. I know there's a series that's going to be taking place, you know, in churches about this issue and other issues. And that's where our hope lies. And there's one other thing that you made me think about was these prejudices that we learn, how to discriminate against others. I really did a lot of reflecting because on the issue of sexism, going back to the issue of racism in my community. And I realized that when I was just growing up, we were taught in the South and elsewhere that somehow because of our race, whites were superior, others inferior. And it's amazing, not the priest, not the teachers, parents, or us students ever said, you know, there's a problem here. What you are teaching us is wrong. I mean, this was taught in the school, in the workplace, in our churches, in where we came to worship this all-loving God. And what I believe, and I'm hearing this from others, that gives me great hope. If we can only see our prejudices, our discrimination against others, and go through a process of how the way I feel is because of what I've been taught, there's hope. Just as we learned how to discriminate, we were taught that, we can unlearn it. We can go through a process, and so many are doing that. We have the potential because of the divine in our everyday life. We're always touched by God, not knowing this is going on. And we have the potential of really becoming more loving, more inclusive. And I see this when I go into colleges. Wow, I feel so joyful because I find here that the new generation are not being taught what I and others have been taught years ago. Much more inclusive, much more accepting, believing that yes, we are all called around that table as equals. And when it comes to the youth, true, they might be dropping out of the institutional churches simply because they do not see that love and that inclusivity there, that oneness, but rather the opposite. And so there's just such wonderful things going on around us. Perhaps what's important is to be a part of that. In closing, I want to say, I can understand why so many of my friends have left the church. Some with anger and some who just said, adios, and never looked back. And they have been so hurt. They come home and say, I can no longer be in that church because I feel, I hear the word invisible. I don't feel welcome because of my gender or my sexual orientation. I'm not accepted. I can't take it anymore, and leave. And there are others, and I want, if you have what it takes, I would really ask that you consider trying to stay in the faith community, the Catholic Church or your other church or, you know, faith tradition, whatever that might be. If possible, think about it. And I have thought, really, I wrote a letter a few years ago. I couldn't take it anymore, I felt. And I'm glad I didn't send the letter to the Vatican, resigning the priesthood because of my church's teachings. Had I done that and I came so close, oh wow, I think they would have opened a bottle of champagne. That pain in the butt has gone. I mean, oh, let us give thanks. But I've learned from the women in this documentary, quite a few who I know, who just so inspired me, who thought too of leaving, as many have, but came to a decision, no, this is our church. I will not allow, they said, you men to claim ownership for what is not yours. It's ours. We are a faith community, and our Creator speaks through all of us equally. No one has a monopoly of the truth. And another thing I reflected on, perhaps it's sort of that warrior within me, that warrior spirit. If we leave and allow bullying to continue, bullies will continue to do what they always do, abuse power and beat up on people and cause suffering to others. And I will not allow our church leaders to simply continue doing what they are doing to our church and the suffering that they are causing. This is our church, and they must be told in loving ways, that what they are doing and the teachings that they defend are unacceptable. This is such a contradiction to what this man Jesus was all about. And if you can, I know it helped me. I thought about that a lot, and I'm just grateful that I did not leave. I'm going to stay in and try to reform the church with so many other people. I'm not alone. There are so many people out there, and hope that you can be a part. I know many of you already are a part of that struggle that will continue for justice, for equality. It's never going to go away. And to be a part of this with consequences, I must say it's worthwhile. I know that at the very core of our movement, which really brings us here into our movement, are our sisters and brothers of countries like El Salvador, Guatemala, Colombia, Bolivia, Chile, and all the other countries whose soldiers are here. Those who have been killed, silenced by graduates of this school, the tens and tens of thousands of our sisters and brothers. The landless farmers in El Salvador, those university students in Guatemala, the labor leaders in Colombia, the healthcare workers, those spiritual leaders, and all the others. And among the thousands are 4 church women from our country, Mara and Ida, Dorothy, Jean, who went there to serve the poor of El Salvador. It was their deep love for the poor that brought them there at the invitation of Bishop Romero. Ida Ford, in a letter to her niece back home when she was in El Salvador shortly before her death, killed by graduates of this school, she wrote this: I hope you come to find that which gives your life a deep meaning for you, something worth living for, maybe even worth dying for, something that energizes you, enthuses you, and enables you to keep moving ahead. And it's really the words of Ida and all the others of these countries who bring us here today. And this is a very, very sacred day for us because we are here to represent them
to keep their memories alive. Thank you.
Chavarria, 55 years old.
for such activities is provided and available in the civilian community. The sole purpose of this installation is to provide for the military training of soldiers. This policy is completely consistent with the American constitutional tradition that the military must remain politically neutral and under the control of a democratically elected civilian government.
No se permitirán manifestaciones, marchas ni actividades políticas organizadas de ningún tipo en el fuerte de Benning, Georgia. De entrada en esta instalación, usted violará el artículo 18, sección 382 del Código de Estados Unidos y estará sujeto a multa o encarcelamiento. El foro apropiado para dichas actividades existe en la comunidad civil.